cybernetic ecology.
Hello, and welcome to 30 Days Live Retrospective. Tonight we'll be revisiting the 98-99 season, and in a moment you'll be joined by two Todd, Ristau, and Jessica McCoy. Talk about
Hello, friends. I think Anne might be having a little bit of technical difficulties. As you can see, I am not as dapper tonight, but you got to put up with me. I think she probably dropped off around the point she was talking about our community partners, and our spotlight tonight we're talking about the Virginia shop. They've been around for a long time, and Tiffany has been a community member for a long time, and they are doing quarantine gift bags, and I believe they have both delivery and curbside pickup. So support them if you are able. Tonight we are joined by Todd Ristau and Jessica McCoy. They were around in that 98-99 time, and so they're going to join us tonight and reflect on some of that with us. And also, it's Liz behind the scenes tonight, so I might get to poke fun at her. Hey, Todd.
Hi, did I click too soon?
No, you clicked at the exact right time. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you? I'm
doing really well. Hi, Jessica.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Why don't we start with you, Jessica? And why don't you just tell us what got you first involved with live arts, and maybe what you're doing now?
Okay. I first got involved at live arts in 1999, early 2000. So slightly before this season. I had just moved to Charlottesville, and after I graduated from college, and was in a place in my life where I was, trying to figure out who I wanted to be when I grew up, and I'm still working on it sometimes. And I just knew that I needed to find a home and a sense of community, because I didn't really know anyone in Charlottesville. And I walked into the live arts office. I had heard about it from friends that I had met, and I think probably Maggie Moore grabbed me and gave me a paintbrush and put me to work, and I started working on shows. And over the years that I've been involved with live arts, I've done a little bit of everything, really, from design and stage management, the lab space, producing. So it really was like a formative experience for me to be at live arts and to really immerse myself in theater making, which I hadn't done theater since high school at that point. So I wasn't a theater major in college, and it was kind of like a crash course master's program in theater making during that first 2.5 years that I was in Charlottesville. And it changed the course of my life. Like, I moved into arts administration, and currently I do consulting work with nonprofits in fundraising and strategic planning, and also do some producing in New York. And a lot of what I learned in the lab space, I still use today in terms of learning how to sit with people and talk to them about their ideas and their dreams and their projects, and how can we make them happen. So
yeah. And you're in New York now.
I'm in New York now, and I work out of a artist-based co-working space called the Artist Co-op, and we have people from all genres of performing arts and writers and filmmakers in that space, and so I collaborate with a lot of them.
Glad to see you're safe.
Thank you.
What about you, Todd?
Well, I've been doing theater pretty much my whole life because it was this socially acceptable way to pretend in public. And I've been I went to the University of Iowa. I did a lot of theater. I was in a theater company for a short while a year really, that only performed in prisons doing Grotowski-based improvisational mask work. I was in a garage band who went to London. I got an MFA in playwriting from the Iowa Playwrights Workshop. I started a couple of theater companies, moved to Chicago, and then got divorced and focused on staying alive for a couple of years and didn't do any theater. And I met this library student at Iowa who got a job in Charlottesville, and I followed her there in 1998. And meeting Joan was what started my return to my home in the theater. I got to Charlottesville, and one of the first things that I did was I went to the Festival of the Book, and Fran Smith was doing a panel on new plays. And I thought, well, I'm a playwright, I'll go check that out. And I asked a question from the back of the room, and it must have impressed Fran because she came up afterwards and kind of pulled me aside and said, I really liked your question. Would you be interested in playing a part? I have a role for you that I think you'd be perfect for in a show that we're doing at Live Arts. I'm like, sure. So I got cast as the older brother of the love interest in an adaptation of The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. And that experience in the lab was really my return to the theater. And it was a great way to meet lots and lots of people at Live Arts. Fran, Lydia Oogie, Steve Tharp, lots of other people did that show. Then immediately was in Heritage Rep, where I met all of the UVA people. And it's so great that there's so much crossover between Live Arts and UVA, because I was directed by Betsy Tucker, met Bob Chapel, Doug Grissom, so, and then I got hired almost immediately after that to teach theater at Mary Baldwin College. Was cast by Boomie Peterson to play John Boy Walton in an outdoor production of a Walton's episode. So it was an incredible and dynamic return to the theater, and it wouldn't really happen if Live Arts wasn't such a living embodiment of its core mission, which is forging theater and community and really helping people to find each other.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that y'all found us. So let's look at some pictures. Talk about a season.
Great.
Hey, look at you.
Hey. Great room called Day.
Yeah, like I said, I arrived on the scene in 1988, so I wasn't able to see a lot of the shows at Live Arts. But
sure.
Yeah, Kristen Keithley directed that show, and Patrick Reed did the lighting design for it, and he gave me a lot of comments about how there's Tony Powell, how they really made a point at designing the space so that the daylight would only come in from one corner, and you can see the work that went into that.
It's one of the things that I think is so great about Live Arts. I love little theaters that are in converted spaces because it really forces everyone involved to be very creative in addressing problems, because the problems haven't been solved by an architect and designer ahead of time.
Sure. Yeah. Speaking of Betsy Tucker, I think this was the first show that Betsy directed at Live Arts.
Really?
Yeah.
There's
Kay and Doreen. Yeah.
Larry Emmons.
And she's a perfect person to play Mrs. Warren. She also is a very welcoming person when I first, everyone at Live Arts was, but Fran and Kay were really amazing.
Yeah.
Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Yeah, another Gibson extravaganza.
Exactly.
And Phyllis was just in Follies. And there's Jane Scatina.
Yeah. Alexandra Scott sent me a message about the show, and she was saying how Jane was such a professional and she was so dedicated to the role that it really elevated everyone around her.
Yeah.
Some amazing pictures.
7 Guitars by August Wilson. That was the
Mhm.
first show that Teresa Dal Vest directed
Mhm.
when she came back from her graduate program in California. Clinton Johnston, good friend.
Mhm.
Worked
Teresa was
with
telling me
Moab.
they carted in 5 tons of dirt for this show.
Yes, and they also had with the, just when they struck it, they had been spraying it down throughout the show to prevent it from dusting up the set, and it was like a rock. It was just concrete.
This was a foolery show, wasn't it?
No,
No, this was
no,
UVA.
it was a UVA co-production, and I don't know who directed it. The show notes didn't really have a lot of information.
Yeah, I missed this one.
But I think it might have been one of those early collaborations with UVA. Part of that early mission of forging theater and community, I think, was part of that was going to other companies in Charlottesville and really working to bring them in. Here's foolery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love the Fools.
Mm-hmm.
I love everything about foolery. And I also think it's such a great way that, you know, a lot of, one of the early slogans for Live Arts was that I always heard John Gibson saying over and over again, that they're community theater with professional standards. And oftentimes, you know, a community theater is so focused on their very specific mission and keeping their doors open. But one of the great things about Live Arts is the way that they open their doors to so many other companies and literally formed lots and lots of partnerships to help people, you know, give voice to their vision. Ron Heller.
So, directed by Francine Smith.
Of course, yeah. Now, our friends at Fort County we're going to be producing this coming season, and I think that they, you know, they along with everybody else, were wondering what we're going to be doing next.
Right. Rhonda Hewitt was in this one as well, and Janet Heath. Jesus Christ, superstar.
That is such a great poster. I love everything about it.
Yeah, they really, the vision for that show, I was, got a message from both Patrick Reed and Peter Greiser, who worked on the show, and they really worked with John to create a vision that was really modern. And Peter did a lot of digital remixing and creating of weird instruments. And basically they rewrote the whole, rewrote the whole score for that show by, you know, they were able to keep and still keep it within copyright license. We weren't breaking the rules. It was, he changed the instrumentation a bit, and as long as the beats were the same, the orchestration could be adjusted for the ensemble that they had. So,
I think that if you were
really
working with a
cool.
musical, if you were working on a musical with John Gibson, you have to expect that you're going to be engaging in some deconstruction.
Right.
Tony Powell was Herod. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. And they also, that was a show where they made it rain on stage, and they had the rain coming down from a sprinkler into a trough and like recycling it for each show. So that was a cool use of that space at that time.
So So the thing that you two are most involved in really was some of the alternative programming at Live Arts, right? So the sort of
Right.
what was really kind of like a precursor to what we now are calling our Foundry programming, which is sort of a group of our programming now. But so tell me a little bit about Lab. Tell me about some of the beginnings of that.
Jessica was there
So
at the
Live
time.
Arts, when I came in, when I came into Live Arts in the late 90s, it was definitely going through a massive growth spurt. You know, there were a lot of new people coming into Live Arts. It was known in the community. It was becoming much more established. It was outgrowing the space in the Mickey building at the time, and it had developed more of its programming infrastructure. Like, I think that was around the time that the programming committee got started, and they were really programming regular seasons in the main space, and the staff really had their hands full with the main space. So aside from the latte program in the lab, which I know you were part of back in the day, they didn't have as much programming in the lab theater. And there were a lot of volunteers who I think were feeling a bit nostalgic for those days when programming could be a little bit looser and a little bit more experimental. And if someone had an idea for a solo show, or they were part of an ensemble that had a little project they were trying to develop, that they wanted a space to do that. So the Live Arts Theater Ensemble at that time, we were kind of organizing ourselves as a volunteer body, and we had an executive committee within the ensemble, and we went to the staff and the board and asked if we could put together a proposal for the volunteers to run the lab space and to work within the framework of Live Arts mission and its programming guidelines. We couldn't just completely do whatever we wanted to do. We had to put together proposals for projects and get them fleshed out and then bring them, to the staff for approval. But we put that proposal together to take over the lab, and the board said yes. They gave us a $10,000 budget, and they said, earn $2 for every dollar you spend, and go forth and make theater. And so early on in that process, I pitched a proposal that we put together a No Shame Theater in Charlottesville, because it was a project that I had some familiarity with from when I was an undergrad at the University of Iowa. And I was like, it's experimental, it's fun, it's going to bring in a lot of people, it fits all of these parameters that we have for the lab, and it's not going to cost as much because people bring in their own props and their own costumes if they're going to wear them, and it's much looser and more of a cold read than anything else.
Yeah, sure.
And when I was pitching it, I was like, it was made, it was created by this guy named Todd Ristau, and somebody was like, hold up, he lives here. And so we brought Todd in, and he kind of took over the No Shame part of the lab and served as our leader and advisor in developing that program. And we also started working on our other programming. We had solo shows by, a lot of different artists. We had puppets, we had by Russell Richards, we had a lot of musicians came in. The song that we heard in the opener was by Lance Brenner. It was recorded in the lab space, part of the King of My Living Room shows that they did several times back then. And
Lance, who just made a return to Live Arts not all that long ago.
Yeah. So,
So Todd,
Yeah.
so could you speak to for a second, just kind of about sort of maybe the beginning of No Shame, kind of what is No Shame?
Well, No Shame started at the University of Iowa when there used to be this sort of precursor called Midnight Madness that was written for exclusively by the MFA playwrights. But it gave all of the undergraduates an opportunity to perform and get stage experience without having to go through an audition process. But then a bunch of new playwrights came in that were not as interested in being forced to stay up until 2 a.m. every Friday night as part of their degree program. And so they kind of shut down Midnight Madness, but the undergraduate actors were like, we want this back. So this friend of mine, Stan Ruth, and I were drinking an adult beverage and eating a crock pot of beans and complaining about the actors complaining. And I was like, if they had any gumption, they would create their own venue. They don't need fancy playwrights to write for them. They don't need a fancy theater space. They could perform in the back of a truck like El Teatro Campesino. And I said, I've got a truck. Let's do it in the back of my truck. You shouldn't be ashamed of the theater you have access to. And my friend Stan yelled out, "No Shame Theater." And that's where the name came from. I went to the head of the department and said, can we do some skits in the back of my truck on Friday night? And Bob Headley said, as long as the department has nothing to do with it, I think it's a great idea. So it was a really subversive kind of thing. We did these short pieces out of the back of my pickup truck in the theater parking lot with a motorcycle headlamp for our stage lights, my truck stereo for the sound system. And at the end of the night, I drove my theater home. It became a really integrated part of the theater at Iowa because it was a way for people to experiment without failure being negatively impacting their grade point average. And I got asked to do a No Shame franchise at Home for Contemporary Theater Art in New York City by Randy Rollison. And then little No Shame franchises started popping up around the country. And there are only 3 rules. Pieces have to be short, they have to be original, and you can't break anything, including the law. But outside of that, you can do literally anything you want. And John Gibson heard about all of this. He took me out for a coffee and had me explain it all to him. And he was like, wait, so when you say people could come in and light a fire, you mean they could literally light a fire? And I said, well, yeah, we live in danger of any given No Shame shutting down the theater, but that's part of the excitement. And because John and Live Arts and the lab in particular were devoted to finding as many opportunities to say yes to things, he said yes. And it ran for like 10 years at Live Arts, and a lot of people cut their teeth there. And it generated a ton of income because people paid $5 at the door, and we sold $1 PBRs. And I think we
Tell
brought
a Rolling Rock if you're fancy.
I think we brought in like $15,000 a year just from that. So that revenue from low cost, no shame really helped make a lot of other projects possible. And we had people who discovered that they were playwrights, and they might do a piece at No Shame that turned into a 10-minute play or something larger. We did I think 3 10-minute play festivals in the lab that were kind of an outgrowth of that. And like Jessica was saying, a great thing about being part of that lab experience was the lab representative had a seat on the Live Arts board. So in addition to learning everything you know on a micro scale, in addition to learning things about lighting and set construction and publicity and everything, you also got a chance to learn real arts administration. So you had an experiential, bone deep understanding of what went into the decision-making process on the other side of the table. You got to sit in on board meetings and report back. I just can't say enough good things about Live Arts. And even though I came in thinking I knew a lot, man, I learned so much, including from John Gibson as an artistic director.
Yeah, the whole staff really just, in addition to the board meetings, I often was able to make it to staff meetings so that I could talk about the projects that we were working on and sort of talk through the logistics with them. I was 23 years old when I was the lab chair, and I cannot underestimate or like I think back on that now, and I'm like, you gave a 23-year-old keys to a theater space and encouraged them and nurtured them and mentored them. But yes, they did, and that was so much, you know, what live arts was about. I had so many
And it was such
incredible mentors.
I mean, No Shame in particular is this tremendous umbrella where every different subculture can come in and find a home and introduce themselves through their work. Like we had Sal Milione and a bunch of other musicians who wrote original songs. They would, you know, we had to kind of coerce them into coming to play at No Shame, but then they were completely in love with it afterwards, because for many of them, it was the very first time they had played an original song where everyone in the audience listened to every note and every word and then applauded after the song instead of trying to get their attention in a bar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so for our audience, it was really funny. We started this conversation with Jessica and Todd saying, "Hey, would y'all come and spend a day with us? Do you happen to have anything from those days?" And they had everything.
We don't have everything, actually.
Yeah, and so we have a bunch of posters from those days. So so we get a chance to look through some pictures and some posters from that.
That's a No Shame performance there in the lab space. That's me, a much younger me when I still had hair color.
We don't have everything at all. We have, Todd was a much better archivist than I was, and I didn't collect any archival materials from the first year of No Shame. So if you did any work in the lab, you should send them to Live Arts so that they can be included in the archives.
Yes.
We had, one of the other things that was really unique about the lab was that we had different options. Sorry, go ahead, Todd.
Americo as Santa Claus and Justin Wolfe as Rudolph.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Jessica.
No, that's fine. What I was trying to say was that we had multiple ways that people could engage in the lab, where they could either be produced by Live Arts or they could self-produce in the space and rent the space from us. So not everything has a Live Arts lab logo on it. Some of them are rentals.
That poster there with the fire breather, that's Jane Jones. And she, as a high school kid, was really active in No Shame. And she still credits No Shame as something that really changed her life. She's now the ed director at the Actors Theater of Louisville, just going gangbusters.
Yeah.
There's the early No Shame staff. Greg Hayes, Sal Milione, Clinton Johnston, Ursula Hull, Lee Moyer, me, and Jane Jones. I think that's Clinton singing his original song, Teenage Waistband. But you can see how
that's back on the Antigua.
Really intimate. That picture on the left is actually from Iowa City, No Shame.
Okay.
But that piece got him banned because that was confectioner's sugar that went all over.
At least it wasn't.
What law is that breaking?
Well, it ruined the theatrical blacks, and a bunch of the PAs jumped up to try and clean up the sugar by using a mop bucket, and there were ants. So one of the rules was you can't break the space. You can't break anything, and they broke it. That's Sherwood Ross. He used to come and sing songs that he had written as a kind of civil rights era activist. That's Sean Nitchman down there doing one of his pieces. I think we had 75 seats in the space. And Bill Davis was a Morris dancer, and they came in and did a Morris dancer routine as part of No Shame. So when we say anything can happen, and usually does, we ain't kidding.
Yeah, that was back. That trio back there was Amdi, Tim, and Ian. Yeah. I remember the cornflakes piece here.
That statue next to Greg Hayes back. Oh, there's me playing Hitler with Jane Jones, I think, playing Monica Lewinsky in a Greg Hayes piece about blind dates. There's Ursula and the aforementioned Joan the librarian running the concession stand at No Shame.
Yes, yes. I really miss that space. It was such a charming live space.
That set that I'm sitting on was for Sherwood Ross's play Baron Giro. And I think that's the cast from Berenjero. I'm not sure.
Something that's really palpable in all of these pictures, I think, is the joy that people seem to be experiencing.
Yeah.
Justin used to come in and play the saw. And Mindy came in and did a song on the bass that she also sang called $2 Whore. Unforgettable. That's Ursula up on the light. It was really easy to get people to work the lights because you couldn't pay anybody. But if you told them you get to choose the pre-show music, that was a selling point.
Mhm.
That picture of Clinton and Annalise Moyer at the time, we had serialized a production of my play Puberty Shriek, the werewolf play. And Clinton was playing a drug-injecting hippie werewolf who used to live with the Manson family. And Annalise was this punk rock werewolf. And that's Jane Jones with the purple hair.
Mm-hmm.
Those were good days, man.
Look like it. They look like it. Well, is there a story that you feel like we missed that maybe you want to make sure is shared? Maybe it's a favorite live art story, or just one that maybe you feel like only you remember. Jessica, do you want to take a first swing at that?
I mean, there are so many, countless stories. You know, one of my favorite productions I think we did in the lab space was a devised piece based on Walden that was done by Donald Oldacre, who now goes by Cheval Oldacre. And he had figured, like, we found out that there was actually a basement to the space that we could open up the risers and bring people up in through that. So we really were pushing all of the boundaries of the space. And you know, we had all these crazy ideas for how we designed it and pushed limits. And it was just such a fabulous thing. I think Lewis and Amanda McCraven were involved in that show as well. And, you know, just playing with that theater space and spending all that time sitting with folks and just dreaming up ways to make their dreams come true was such a huge gift for me. And I made so many wonderful friends. Like, live arts is still my family, and I really miss everyone a lot.
I think for me, the thing that I always think of first is, because for me, you know, a lot of live arts was John Gibson. He just embodied the entire spirit and mission of that place. And the thing that I remember most and being so taken by is that as an artistic director who's safeguarding the mission and keeping the doors open, his first priority was always making sure that everyone had the perception, and it wasn't just a perception, it was real, but they had to perceive that they were genuinely being listened to. And that if you couldn't pay people with money, you had to really make sure that they felt overpaid in gratitude. And that was the most important thing about live arts, that they would have something like the Rave Review, where the board served cocktails to the volunteers as an annual, and that they have those little off awards and everything. They care not just about what they're doing, and not just about having an opportunity to do what they want to do. They cared about nurturing the community as well as the artistic endeavors. And that's live arts to me.
Right. Yeah. Whether it was, Maggie Moore getting pizza for a Saturday build and just holding everyone, like, they really held the space for people to grow and to learn and to connect. And it was a beautiful community. Like, it really they really did meet that mission of forging theater and
We
community.
were excited to see what was going to happen. Everything was this delightful, potentially dangerous, but this delightful mystery. What will happen if we do this? I don't know. Let's find out.
Everybody does seem to have stories about lighting the space on fire. Well, friends, I think
We only broke the theater once.
Well, welcome home. You've got big shoes to fill, but boy, it sure seems like you are able and willing, and I think you are exactly the right person to carry on the mission.
Well,
so
thank you, Todd. Thank you. I'm really gratified to be back home. I think that's it for tonight. And tomorrow on our wonderful Mother's Day, we will be celebrating the wonderful humans who brought us into the world. It'll be me speaking to the also really super wonderful Teresa Dowell Vest, and we'll be speaking about the 99-2000 season, and yeah. That's what we'll be talking about. With who? And so Todd, Jessica, thank you both so much for your time and your energy, both in the past and now. And friends at home, thank you for watching. And we'll see you soon.